This week's assignments include some especially well-written, thoughtful, and thought-provoking essays that provide information and analyses about society, foreign policy, and politics of the first 20 or so years of the post-1945 period. Using a point made in one of those articles, they help clarify the way we never were. I want to emphasize a handful of them, although that is not to suggest by any means that the other readings are not valuable and that they can be skipped without harm. All serve as a foundation for this week and future weeks. Lisa Doerr's article on the perils of the back seat is much broader in its coverage and analysis than its subtitle of Date Rape, Race, and Gender implies. It covers such issues as going steady, sex in marriage, peer pressure among teens, concepts of masculinity, pregnancy outside of marriage, note there was no birth control pill until the early 1960s, racial stereotypes and class divisions. Ronald Cohen's article on censorship in youth culture argues that issues with adolescents, teenagers, and youths were not new in the 1950s, but they took new forms and, in Cohen's words, signaled troubling social, cultural, racial, and political undercurrents. Cohen's study deals with suburbs, fathers, peers, the Red Scare, schools, women, television, the ideal home, comic books, congressional investigations, movies, violence, music, race, and television. A tip here: keep in mind that the terms delinquency and delinquent were used with varying meanings. Delinquency can mean breaking a law that applied to everyone, for example, a law against robbery. It can mean breaking a regulation that applied only to teenagers and other youths, for example, a curfew. Or it could mean behaving and dressing in non-traditional and unacceptable ways, for example, wearing a leather jacket or a tight skirt. The Georgianne Shiner article on Sandra Dee, that is to be used with one of the optional projects, focuses on the contested meanings of the 50s, as it uses the teen actress's life in films to clarify a cultural hypocrisy and a real ambivalence about sex in the 50s. Those are Shiner's words. It looks at the importance and appearance and of virginity, at the good girl with sexual desires, at cultural tensions ready to explode. Thus, even if you choose to do another project, you just might want to look over Shiner's essay. Arthur Baum's All-American Automobile is a 1956 look at more than the station wagon. It looks at 4 influences on its popularity and appeal, 3 of which are really central to most of the course: suburban living, growing leisure time, and growing families. The 4th influence, by the way, is a switch from wood to all-metal construction. Now, some tips. 3 points about the 1960s debates. Do not focus on only the first and most famous debate. Do not concentrate on Richard Nixon's weaker presence in the first debate, and pay attention to issues about education, race, technology, foreign policy, and about states versus the national government. Also, do not ignore readings and films related to other presidential elections. If your interest is Kennedy and the 1960 election, you will see from the readings about the 1950s that both make more sense the more you know about the 1950s campaigns and issues. Finally, never forget the Cold War and the growing reality of nuclear weapons and technological advances that cast a shadow on every issue of the period. That shadow is especially evident in the materials on the elections, but it also appears in surprising places. For example, materials about marriage and entertainment. The threat was real, as virtually every American well understood.